Queen Camilla has been placed under detention after FBI investigation in her mansion found some shocking documents that linked her to missing jewelry in the palace. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. The story begins in the tranquil gilded halls of Buckingham Palace, a world that to the public seems serene, almost untouchable. From the outside, the palace radiates a sense of unshakable permanence, towering gates, immaculately kept gardens, and the subtle elegance of centuries of tradition. For Queen Camilla, these walls represented both sanctuary and stage. To the public, she had long embodied a form of quiet authority, performing her royal duties with grace, tact, and careful poise. She moved through her days with the measured precision expected of a queen, attending official ceremonies, hosting dignitaries, and participating in charitable events that cemented her reputation as a devoted consort. Yet, beneath the veneer of public adoration, the palace was a place of immense complexity, where alliances shifted subtly, whispers of intrigue passed in shadowed corners, and appearances could be deceiving. The morning began as any other, with the Queen rising early to review schedules and correspondence. Her staff moved with practiced efficiency, preparing her wardrobe, arranging transport, and ensuring that no detail of her public duties would falter. There was a rhythm to these days, a quiet routine that had long defined life within the royal household. But even within this carefully orchestrated order, tension simmered. Palace aides in attendance had begun to notice discrepancies, minor at first, easily explained by clerical error, misplacement, or oversight. Jewelry inventories did not align. Some documents seemed oddly out of place, and certain deliveries were questioned. These were small inconsistencies, almost insignificant in isolation, but they planted seeds of unease, hints of something that might unravel the meticulously maintained order of the palace. Public perception, however, told a very different story. Queen Camilla was lauded for her dedication and her unwavering presence beside King Charles. Royal watchers often described her as a stabilizing force, someone who could navigate the pressures of monarchy without faltering. Her image was polished, curated, and carefully managed through every engagement. Photographs captured her poised demeanor during official appearances, smiling gently at charitable events or attentively listening during diplomatic meetings. There was a sense of controlled perfection, an impression that the Queen was both omnipresent and untouchable. Yet, as often happens behind the scenes of such carefully constructed public images, not everything was as flawless as it seemed. Palace staff, those who had long worked in service to the crown, understood the delicate balance that existed between loyalty and observation. They knew that their words and actions could carry weight far beyond what outsiders might comprehend. Among these individuals, unease began to manifest in subtle ways: hushed conversations in hallways, nervous glances exchanged over tea, and a growing reluctance to leave items unattended. The sense of tension was palpable, even if it was not yet visible to the outside world. Staff members, despite their commitment to discretion, could feel the palace itself responding to an invisible shift, a quiet tremor running through its halls. While the Queen maintained her composed exterior, there were moments when the weight of her role became tangible. Behind closed doors, discussions about palace security, inventory management, and the handling of valuable artifacts became more frequent. Even minor decisions, once routine, were now accompanied by a subtle undercurrent of caution. The Queen's advisors, always mindful of protocol, began to recognize the importance of safeguarding not only the physical assets of the palace, but also the fragile integrity of the institution itself. Every interaction, every document, every movement of personnel carried significance, and in this environment, the seeds of a brewing storm were quietly taking root. Historical context deepened the complexity of the situation. The monarchy had weathered countless scandals over the centuries, ranging from political intrigue to personal indiscretions. Each incident carried its own set of consequences, reshaping public perception and altering the trajectory of the royal family. But few events had threatened to pierce the carefully constructed veil of loyalty and trust from within. targeting the very individuals tasked with maintaining it. In that sense, the early hints of trouble surrounding the palace's missing jewelry were more than minor operational challenges. They represented a potential rupture of confidence, a threat to the delicate equilibrium that had long sustained royal life. Even as the queen went about her duties, subtle anomalies continued to emerge. Deliveries of rare gemstones and ceremonial objects arrived with incomplete documentation, and certain pieces of jewelry could not be accounted for in inventory logs. At first, these issues were shrugged off as administrative errors, the sort of small oversight that could easily occur in a household responsible for safeguarding centuries of priceless artifacts. But as the discrepancies multiplied, and as the questions began to circle back to the queen herself, the palace environment became increasingly charged with a quiet tension. Staff members, once confident in their roles and responsibilities, now moved with a cautious attentiveness, aware that something unusual was afoot. The public remained blissfully unaware, seeing only the continuity of royal appearances and the steady presence of the queen at ceremonial events. Photos of her attending garden parties, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, and charity galas reinforced the perception of an unshakable figure, composed and dignified. Yet the juxtaposition between public perception and private unease was stark. Behind the scenes, individuals who had devoted their lives to the service of the crown were grappling with uncertainty, realizing that the seeming stability of the palace might be illusory. Small signals, misplaced papers, unexplained absences of certain objects, and the sudden insistence on stricter oversight hinted at a tension that had been simmering just beneath the surface. As days passed, the inconsistencies grew too significant to ignore. Security protocols were quietly revised, inventories meticulously rechecked, and conversations that once felt routine took on a sharper, more urgent tone. Advisors began to wonder whether the anomalies were the result of simple human error, or if they pointed towards something more deliberate. Within the palace, the queen maintained an unwavering front, projecting confidence and control. Yet the undercurrents of suspicion continued to swell, imperceptible to the public eye, but undeniably present within the walls of power. It was a delicate dance, maintaining the outward image of calm while navigating a world increasingly fraught with uncertainty and quiet alarm. The first real test of the palace's stability came during an internal review of valuable artifacts. A select group of trusted aides was tasked with cataloging a collection of rare and historic jewelry. As they meticulously examined each piece, they began to notice items missing, others misfiled, and some recorded in ways that contradicted prior inventories. Initial discussion suggested mistakes, but soon it became clear that these were not ordinary discrepancies. The anomalies were systematic, revealing a pattern that could not be easily dismissed. Anxiety rippled through the staff, and whispered concerns gradually coalesced into a recognition that something had changed. There was a breach, whether through carelessness or intent, and the palace could not simply ignore it. In this environment of quiet unease, Queen Camilla's reputation as a stabilizing and dependable figure was subtly challenged. While outwardly she continued to fulfill her public duties with elegance, the atmosphere behind closed doors had shifted. Staff members, advisors, and even family members began to operate with heightened vigilance, acutely aware that every action might have implications far beyond their immediate comprehension. The weight of centuries of tradition pressed down on the institution. Yet, for the first time in years, cracks began to show, signaling that even the most seemingly resilient figures could be vulnerable to scandal, scrutiny, and the relentless pressures of accountability. The first murmurs about the missing jewelry were so quiet that many dismissed them outright. They began as subtle comments in the palace corridors, fragments of conversations overheard in hushed tones. A tray of jewels was found slightly out of place. A small brooch, normally displayed in a locked cabinet, was missing for a day and then mysteriously returned. At first, the staff told themselves these were minor mistakes, clerical errors, misremembered inventories, or perhaps a miscommunication among the aides. Yet, as the days passed, the anomalies began to accumulate, forming a pattern too precise to ignore. For the palace staff, these were more than trivial errors. They were signs that the palace, a place built on centuries of order and protocol, was vulnerable. Every member of the household was acutely aware of the value of these treasures, not only monetary but symbolic, representing the legacy, power, and prestige of the monarchy itself. The missing items, although relatively few in number, carried immense historical significance. Some were gifts from foreign dignitaries, others heirlooms passed down through generations. Each piece a tangible link to a history that could never be replaced. And yet, here they were, disappearing without explanation, slipping through a system designed to prevent even the smallest misstep. The palace's chief curators and archivists began their own quiet investigation. They rechecked ledgers, cross-referenced acquisition dates, and interviewed aides who had access to the valuables. What they discovered deepened the unease. Some items had not just gone missing. They had been deliberately miscatalogued, recorded under incorrect labels, or placed in locations inconsistent with previous documentation. It was subtle enough that a casual observer might miss it, but for those who had spent decades safeguarding royal treasures, it was glaring. The inconsistencies could not be ignored, and soon the whispers that had begun as inconspicuous chatter grew louder, carrying an unmistakable weight of concern and suspicion. It was during this time that the first rumors about Queen Camilla's involvement began to surface. They were faint at first, passing from one aide to another in a mix of disbelief and apprehension. Could she have known? One staff member asked quietly. Would she? The questions remained unfinished. Yet the mere act of asking them signaled a shift in perception within the palace. For centuries, queens had been viewed as symbols of virtue and stability, above suspicion and beyond reproach. The idea that one could be implicated in the disappearance of priceless jewels seemed almost unthinkable. And yet the subtle evidence, the misplacements, the anomalies, the deliberate errors began to sow seeds of doubt in even the most loyal hearts. Outside the palace, these whispers were of course invisible. To the public, Queen Camilla's life appeared untroubled. She attended ceremonial events, charity galas, and public engagements with the elegance and composure that had long defined her role. Photographs captured her smiling in sunlight, graciously receiving dignitaries, or addressing charitable organizations with apparent serenity. There was no hint of the storm brewing behind the palace walls. The contrast between public perception and internal reality created a tension that only those who worked closely with the Queen could understand. A silent drama that unfolded in the corridors, private offices, and vaults of Buckingham Palace. As the whispers grew, so too did the anxiety among those closest to the Queen. Staff members who had once felt secure in their positions now moved cautiously, aware that even the smallest misstep could draw scrutiny. Conversations that had once been casual and routine were now carefully measured. Trust, the glue that had long held the household together, began to feel fragile. Even minor disagreements sparked suspicion, and every gesture, every comment, was interpreted through a lens of heightened alertness. The palace, a place meant to embody tradition and stability, had become a crucible of uncertainty, where every move could carry consequences far beyond what was visible. Historical comparisons only heightened the tension. The British monarchy had weathered scandals before, from political intrigue and personal indiscretions to public controversies over conduct and loyalty. Yet few had involved potential breaches of trust so intimately tied to the material legacy of the crown. Jewelry beyond its beauty represented centuries of lineage, political alliances, and personal history. Its disappearance, particularly under suspicious circumstances, was not merely an operational problem. It was a symbolic threat. For those who had dedicated their lives to the service of the monarchy, the realization was chilling. The stability and integrity of the palace, and perhaps of the monarchy itself, was at risk. It was during one particularly tense week that the first formal acknowledgement of the anomalies occurred. A senior aide discreetly requested a meeting with Queen Camilla. The staff member, one who had served faithfully for decades, approached the Queen with a mixture of fear and respect. Documents were presented, inventories were reviewed, and concerns were raised with the utmost delicacy. The Queen, as ever, maintained her composed demeanor, listening intently while giving measured responses. Yet, even in this carefully controlled setting, the weight of the missing items and the potential implications of their disappearance began to manifest. The room filled with centuries of royal history seemed suddenly smaller, the tension almost tangible. The internal investigation that followed was meticulous. Every staff member with access to the jewelry was questioned, security camera logs were reviewed, and historical acquisition records were cross-checked. No detail was too small to escape scrutiny. Each discovery, no matter how minor, was catalogued and analyzed. The palace became a hive of quiet activity, a place of tension, suspicion, and meticulous observation. Staff moved about their duties with a dual consciousness, fulfilling their responsibilities while simultaneously being aware that every action might be examined in light of the growing mystery. It was a delicate balancing act, one that required vigilance, discretion, and emotional restraint. As the palace investigation progressed, the rumors began to reach a wider audience, albeit still unofficially. Trusted contacts outside the palace, loyal journalists, and even close acquaintances began to catch wind of discrepancies that were more serious than ordinary clerical errors. These whispers traveled through informal networks, generating speculation that, while unverified, could not be entirely ignored. It was a delicate moment. Information that might seem insignificant in isolation was beginning to form a narrative that hinted at something far more substantial. Questions arose. Was this simply a matter of mismanagement, or was there something more deliberate at play? At the same time, the palace culture itself was being tested. Loyalty, once unquestioned, began to feel conditional. Staff who had long devoted themselves to the service of the crown now faced moral and professional dilemmas. How could they reconcile their commitment to the Queen with the growing evidence of discrepancies in the jewelry inventory? How could they act responsibly without betraying trust or exposing themselves to consequences? Every decision carried weight, and the emotional burden on the individuals involved was immense. It was in these moments of uncertainty that the human element of the story became most vivid. The fear, doubt, and moral complexity that often lies hidden beneath the polished surface of royalty. And then, as if the palace itself had waited for the perfect moment to escalate the drama, the whispers began to take a more pointed shape. Specific items were identified as definitively missing, with documentation suggesting deliberate removal rather than accidental misplacement. Questions arose about who had last handled them, when they had last been seen, and under what circumstances they had disappeared. The pattern was too consistent, too precise to be accidental. A quiet consensus began to form among palace aides and curators. This was no ordinary inventory issue. It was a mystery, one that hinted at a breach of trust with consequences that could reverberate far beyond the palace walls. The tension reached a new peak when the first informal speculations about Queen Camilla's possible knowledge or involvement began to circulate among the aides. Though still whispered and unconfirmed, the idea planted seeds of doubt that could not be easily dispelled. Staff debated in private corners, weighing evidence, recalling small anomalies, and piecing together fragments of observation that suggested something more deliberate than mere oversight. These discussions, though cautious and discreet, reflected a growing awareness. The missing jewelry was no longer simply a problem to be managed. It was becoming a scandal, one that had the potential to destabilize the carefully maintained order of the palace and tarnish the public image of the monarchy. The drama of the missing jewels was not only about objects, it was about symbolism, trust, and power. Each piece carried with it centuries of history, the weight of tradition, and the implicit expectations of those who safeguarded them. Their disappearance signaled not merely a failure of procedure, but a potential fracture in the moral and institutional foundation of the royal household. For those who served the monarchy, the implications were staggering. They faced a dilemma: protect the institution, report anomalies, or attempt to uncover the truth themselves. Every choice came with risks, and every step carried emotional weight. By the time the whispers had evolved into serious concerns, it was clear that the palace could no longer treat the situation casually. What had begun as minor anomalies had grown into a narrative too significant to ignore. The stage was set for an intervention that would reach far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace, drawing in international authorities, media attention, and eventually public scrutiny of intensity rarely experienced by members of the royal family. And at the center of it all was Queen Camilla, whose poised exterior masked the storm building quietly yet inexorably.